Bonus Banter by BuildingWell.
Can I read you another quote, Michelle?
Anytime. This is Bonus Banter by BuildingWell after episode 7 of the BuildingWell podcast from New Ecology. Alina and I thought it would be nice to take a few minutes after each podcast episode and just reflect and talk about what we learned and what surprised us and what was interesting. We hope you enjoy this additional bonus episode. Welcome to Bonus Banter. So, Alina, what did you think about that interview with Wen and Paul?
I thought it was really interesting. The paper was amazing. I hope everybody reads it. The focus on energy burdens for low-income residents and the long-term climate resiliency is a really interesting topic. I learned a lot about why we are doing passive house certifications on buildings and what that means for residents in the long term, which I think was really great.
Yeah, I think I personally had like two big takeaways. One was just how much of every piece of this process is kind of a guess, right? It's estimated or it's assumed or something, which is just interesting. It's not bad or anything. And then the second part is, if I personally were a selectman or on a board of a city in Massachusetts, I would definitely choose that passive ready energy code for my town, specifically because of what Wen and Sankanil learned in this research. You know, if a home is already passive and well insulated, it's going to burden the residents less as the climate continues to change, and they won't be impacted as harshly by severe weather events. You know, their home will maybe stay cooler in the summer for a few more days or warmer in the winter for a few more days in the case of a catastrophic weather event.
Yeah, totally. In the paper, they reference Simmons et al. 2022, which said that passive house multifamily buildings may be achieving 52 to 64% improvement in energy performance over existing buildings, which is a huge percentage.
It's enormous.
I thought that was pretty interesting, that it is just such a huge difference. So I agree. If I was in charge of the energy codes, I think I would be also supporting that.
Right.
Because the energy burden on low-income folks will be much less in those buildings. Mm-hmm. It does kind of beg the question, though, of all this existing buildings, like how do we move the needle there? So it's great to say new construction needs to be passive house, but then how do we go about it for the many, many hundreds, thousands of multifamily existing buildings that we have?
Right, exactly. It's a huge undertaking. I know we talked about it with Marty and Pat in one episode, and then a little bit also with Neil and Charlie with domestic hot water lens. But I think it's something everybody's thinking about right now. And I was surprised I didn't know that Passive House has just put out a new existing buildings pathway. That was great to hear because, like you said, Alina, if Passive House is the best and we have all these existing buildings, we want them to go up to the best standards as well, not just new construction.
Yeah. There's one quote from the paper on the second page. It said, "Equity is defined as fair accessibility to affordable and efficient energy. This is crucial because the affordability of energy use relative to low-income levels influences the scalability of the broader goals of sustainability and decarbonization." The affordability of the energy use is so connected to the scalability of decarbonization. I think that is a really important piece that I wanted to highlight.
Yeah. And I think that even specifically in Massachusetts, as far as we are in this realm, we're not there yet, right? Because electricity specifically is very expensive. Gas is still comparatively cheap, but we're trying to move people towards, passive house or decarbonization, which means a heavier reliance on electricity. So there's a gap there that isn't addressed.
Yeah. I'd like to get more into the grid resiliency as we move towards electrification, how we support the grid, avoid outages, like all that. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's great that the research shows that passive house buildings are more resilient when there are outages, but there's sort of another element there, not in the research paper, about how we avoid the outages and like have a resilient grid that will be able to withstand the energy needs when it's hotter and there's more air conditioning, or it's really cold in the winter and there's a lot of heat. So I think that's an interesting topic.
Exactly. We didn't really have time to get into it, but Paul was mentioning, microgrids and things like that, which are some tools that can help this, but I'd really like to dive into that a little more and learn about it more.
Yeah, for sure. Can I read you another quote, Michelle?
Anytime.
Regarding equity, for low-income communities living in well-insulated buildings, the correlation between energy burden and climate change is insignificant. However, for those residing in poorly insulated housing, the energy burden decreases as the climate warms. Just so important that it's well-insulated. I mean, I feel that's like obvious. That quote kind of gets me because it's like the well-insulated buildings are showing that climate change won't have as much of an impact on people's financials, like on their personal finances, as the energy burden won't be as impacted. But if you're in a poorly insulated building, it's getting really hot in the summer, it's getting really cold in the winter, and your energy burden is going to get worse. And so thinking through what we're doing in buildings where passive house is really good in the winter, and we might want to start thinking about like that humidity aspect that Paul was talking about, and like the heat in the summer here in Massachusetts, at least. Like, how do we ensure that we're prepared for that part? And it's year round serving the residents, not just focused on the winter, since the summers are getting worse. I mean, we're sitting here and it's like a heat wave for like the last 2 weeks. I know we're releasing this in the fall, but like we've been in like 90-degree weather for days and days right now. So it's definitely top of mind.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you turn off your AC when it's 95 degrees and very humid out, you'll know right away, which would be the same if your power went out, your AC would go out and all that cold air would just bleed out the house really quickly.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
Yeah. The paper references a step in the right direction, being to incorporate those future weather files in the models and the design process, so that we're starting to think about that and projecting it and planning for it in the building.
Yes. It's not exactly the same, but it's similar to what we talked about with Neil and Charlie about hot water, where models are based on assumptions. And they might also, in this case, they're 30 years old. Those ASHRAE models they were talking about were 40 years old. It's not what's happening right now, and it's definitely not what's happening in the future. And I think some of these guidelines have to update.
Yeah, the parallels are really interesting between the timing of that and then also the peak element and kind of flattening the peaks in the usage. It's both really interesting that it's similar in domestic hot water as well as in heating and cooling.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alina, for discussing this and just getting our thoughts out there. Sometimes these topics are really dense, so it's nice to be able to reflect.
Absolutely. And congrats on entering the second half of our first season together.
Yes, congratulations.
All right. I'll see you on the next.
See you on the next. Bye.
Bye.